Hello everybody, how's it going? Tornado Soup here. Today we're starting something a little different. So if you saw my Young Justice Outsiders review, then you know I mentioned that I'll be taking a little step into the magical land of reviews. I won't list out all of my thoughts on reviews here. If you really want, you can go watch that video. But basically, I wanted to do something different than just reviewing movies or TV shows or new comics. There might be some of that, like an eventual review of the Titans premiere, but for the most part, those will just be me rambling about my immediate thoughts. This, the first part of a series I'm hoping to do, will be a little different though. Welcome to Where It All Began, where I'll take the first issue of a major series, such as today's subject, Action Comics #1, or the first major appearance of a character, also like today's subject, and, well, we'll review it. Take a look at where it all began. Maybe this is more self-explanatory than I thought. Usually, it'll just be the original series, none of the reboots or relaunches, and it will always be just the first issue and just the first appearance. Issue 2 shall always remain a mystery. Anyway, everyone good? Cool. Then let's dive into Action Comics, issue #1. For those of you who don't know, Action Comics #1, released in 1938, was the first appearance of a little superhero you might have heard of called Zatara. Oh, and Superman was there too. Actually, I can't find the Zatara story without paying like $1 million or so for an original copy, so if anyone has an idea if it's ever been reprinted, I'd love to see it down in the comments. But anyway, this issue took the publishing world by storm, forever changing the comic market. Superman, created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, was the first real superhero, and set the stage for pretty much every character to come after. From Batman, to Wonder Woman, to Captain America, to Spider-Man, to, well, you get it. This one character changed the focus of comics to mainly superheroes, even till today. Shuster and Siegel worked for years on their character, inspired by comic strips such as Tarzan, Camelot, and Dick Tracy, as well as real-life bodybuilders and weightlifters, which is why Superman has the form-fitting and brightly colored costume he does. After dozens of rejections from newspapers across the country, and a dozen more reworkings of the original character, DC Comics, then known as National Comics, finally took the leap and bought the rights to the character that would become their icon, spending only $130 for the rights, which works out to be just over $2,000 today. So, how does this issue actually hold up? Is Superman's 13-page debut story really worthy of the legacy that it's forged? Well, let's see. The story starts off with Superman's origin. Within one page, the origin is pretty much completely explained, from the exploding planet to the kindly couple, who remain unnamed in this issue, to the various powers Clark acquired on Earth. It is worth noting that Superman only has about a fraction of his modern powers, though, lacking flight, heat vision, freeze breath, and so on. There's also this little section of the page that tries to explain Superman's powers scientifically, relating them to the abilities of high-jumping bugs and super-strong insects. It's at this point where you start to wonder why he wasn't just called Bugman, but that's besides the point. I love this little bit because even though it totally interrupts the flow of the story, or at least what passes as the story at this point, it's cool to see that there was more thought put into his powers than Blue Man Punch Good. It also means that at this point, Superman was just about as powerful as Ant-Man, which is a weird concept, but still a cool example of how Clark's powers have progressed through his 80-plus years of existence. It's at this point that the story really starts. Or I guess we jump right into the middle of the story, where Superman is bounding across the sky with a gagged woman under his arm. It's a good thing that there was the prologue to start us off, because this would not be a good introduction to the Man of Steel. I mean, seriously, if you didn't know who Superman was, this would not be a good look for him. Superman lands on the ground of the governor's mansion, setting the woman under a tree. He then breaks into the mansion and intimidates the butler into letting him see the governor. In case you couldn't tell, this early Superman is pretty different from the one we know and love today. Not only are his powers lacking, but his personality is pretty different. He's rough, throwing around criminals like it's no big deal, and smashing cars like he's going to get bonus points for it. He also tries to avoid any recognition, shying away from the spotlight and only accepting it when he absolutely has to. Anyway, he goes to tell the governor that a woman was wrongly accused of a crime and put on death row. Only the governor can stop the execution, which is scheduled to happen about 15 minutes from now. There's a cool bit where there's actually a ticking clock in the corner of some of the panels, which adds to the suspense. The only problem is we're not really introduced to the conflict until the solution, so there's not that much suspense to begin with. We don't even see the woman that's on death row, only the one who actually committed the crimes, who was the woman that was gagged and bound and tossed under the tree. That being said, it is good to see that they branched out a little and made a woman a murderer. And that's true feminism right there, showing that no matter your sex, you too can commit severe crimes worthy of the electric chair. Joking aside, I am actually pretty impressed with Lois in this issue. She's introduced after Superman finishes the whole death row debacle, and right off the bat, she's shown to want more than what the editor of the newspaper is willing to give her, convinced that she has what it takes to tell real stories that mean something. Sure, a couple pages later, she's kidnapped by a few jerks because she went dance with them, but for 1938, in a story written by two men, I'd say this is pretty darn progressive. More than I was expecting, anyway. Clearly, she's a damsel in distress, but Siegel and Schuster did add something to her character besides this one trait. Today, it might not fly, but back then, it works pretty well. So, besides stopping the jerks that take Lois, which is where the image on the cover comes from, Clark also stops a wife beater, which is a little heavier than I would have expected. And then confronts a lobbyist who's trying to corrupt a politician. Yeah, there's actually some pretty complex stuff going on in this story. It's not fleshed out much, but still kind of impressive for what was expected to be a run-of-the-mill funny book. Superman takes the lobbyist from his place in Washington, D.C., so that they can bound across the city, and he can be taken in for a confession. However, Superman misjudges a jump from a phone wire to a building, and they both begin to fall towards the street. And then, well, that's where the issue ends. And, the rules I set out for myself say that I'm only reviewing issue number ones. So, I knew this was going to be a problem I'd run into eventually, but not with the first one. Jeez. Well, I guess you'll have to read issue 2 for yourself. An overwhelming response in the comments might get me to reconsider, but I doubt that'll happen. But yeah, that was Action Comics number 1. It really surprised me, if I'm going to be honest. As essentially the first superhero comic ever, I expected it to be, well, maybe boring isn't the right word, but tame for sure. Honestly, though, it's really a lot of fun. The dialogue is far from groundbreaking, but it's passable. Some people just say the obvious, but, that's how comic books were back then. It's how media in general was back then. And there's just something really enjoyable about watching Superman throw regular people around and seeing him basically being just a dude with slightly enhanced strength. Like I said, he's not much more powerful than Ant-Man in this, and there's a certain grounding element to it that really makes it feel different. And it does fall into a lot of different comic tropes that have been played over and over again, but they're tropes because of this issue. So at the time, this would have been something really new and fresh. Sure, the idea of a secret identity wasn't anything new, having been used in characters like Zorro in the past, but this is what cemented it as a regular part of comics. It also doesn't dwell on the origin, and leaps right into the action. And while this might detract a little from the suspense, it does make sure that you don't get too bored. And everything is set out, from Clark's job as a news reporter, to his rapport with Lois Lane, to his double life as Superman. Siegel and Schuster knew what they wanted to do with this character, but also gave him room to grow. This world isn't overstuffed, but it's still fairly well built. A lot happens, too. This is probably due to the fact that the story was originally meant to be published as a couple weeks' worth of comic strips in the papers, but it still flows together nicely, considering all the stories were written separately. Honestly, overall, Given that Siegel and Schuster were just starting out in a field that was still in its infancy, the issue really holds up. It's bright and colorful, yet somehow pretty grounded in the real world. The art's pretty simplistic, and there are certain panels where something just seems kind of off about Superman, but there was still obviously a style that had been set out, and for the most part, it works. It's dynamic, which is fitting given the character. The differences are also pretty fascinating. Obviously, there's a lot that hasn't changed, like the dying planet and the old couple, but this is far from being the same kind of story as to what's told today. For one, instead of working at the Daily Planet, Clark works at the Daily Star, and the editor isn't named and doesn't really appear to be Perry White. Also, the couple that found the baby Superman weren't necessarily the ones that took him in, as they reported him to the nearest orphanage right away, which, let's face it, makes a lot more sense. Somehow, this version of Superman requires far less suspension of disbelief. I mean, it doesn't seem all that realistic, but it is just a tad more logical than what we have today. That doesn't mean it's better, but it is interesting to see. Overall, I'd rate this 8 bowls of soup out of 10. I guess that's how I rate things. It holds up far better than I would have expected it to, far better than I remembered from when I read it a few years ago, and it's fun to see where a modern-day legend began. It's been reprinted quite a bit, so it shouldn't be too hard to find at a local library, but it's also available on the DC Universe streaming service, so check it out, but be ready for a different kind of Superman. Alright, so that's all I have today. If you have any other issue number ones you'd like me to check out, I'd love to see your ideas down in the comments below. And that's it. Have a great day, everybody, and goodbye.